Well, welcome, good people, to Up Next, another episode. It's a double play tonight on this great Thursday evening. And I'm super excited because I have some more special friends with me, Stephenie Smith and Dr. Nicole Price. What's up?
Hello.
This is very exciting. We're like at home with our good art, with our good bookshelf, and my good kitchen, and my wine bottle in the back. And we're about to have a whole conversation, and it's about to be lit.
Absolutely. I'm excited. What's up, Doc? How you doing?
I'm doing really well. You doing okay?
I'm good. It rained today. I'm feeling refreshed. I love the rain. I love water. So I'm feeling good.
That's good. So I want to kick it off. We kind of already talked about it, but for those who are watching, I want to give them an opportunity to hear about you guys and how you're doing, and just update us on, how's life? How are you doing? How is family? Because we're still mothers, we're still wives. We still got husbands. Graduations are happening. You're almost an empty nester, almost. Then I know Doc, you got the baby, the grandson. So tell us, update us.
Go ahead, Dr. Price. Go ahead.
Yeah, as you can hear, the dogs are in the background losing it right now. I tell people all the time, Joe is a dog person. I kind of like dogs, so we still trying to figure that out after 10 years. But yeah, so he has a daughter that I call her my bonus baby, and she was having a really hard time having Mr. EJ, and so we feel very blessed to have him. He kind of likes my son and my husband a little more than he likes me right now, but I'm expecting that's going to turn around. He just don't know. Babies, they don't know.
I love it. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes.
I am doing a little better today. Yesterday was really rough for so many of us, for so many reasons, but I felt extremely drained yesterday. And so I had to take a few lay downs. But today, like I said, I felt like the rain was symbolic and just kind of washing and doing some cleansing. So I feel way more energized today. But I think on the home and family front, just blessed. It's been, so the other day, the New York Times posted 100,000 names of people who have passed away over the past 12 weeks of COVID. And so I'm really, I feel personally grateful that none of my immediate family members or even family members that I'm aware of are in that, but I also recognize that means that was still 100,000 other people. So I'm grateful for that. And like you said, Phoenix has graduated and we got a 13-year-old that's ready for a dirt bike or something. So anybody hit me up if you got any word on a dirt bike. We're looking for one. So I'm doing well. How are you doing, Kiona?
I'm doing well. This whole Up Next thing was, I think in COVID, we've all kind of had to pivot, and do whatever is best for us, whatever keeps us in high spirits. It's not going to look the same for everybody. So this is my way of, being encouraged and still seeing my people, and still seeing you guys and just sharing these conversations that we could have probably had on a Zoom call. But, we've moved them online so everybody can hear what needs to be said. So here I am.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that you're doing these.
Yeah, I'm grateful that you guys have allowed me to do these. And thank you so much again for coming on the show. I wanted to kick it off. Stevie, you kind of went into it, but just really everything that it's happening. It's heartbreaking. We talked about it earlier on the show with Judge Wimes and Michelle, and, just hearing her remarks about, I hold my breath when my husband goes on a bike ride and I want him to come home. And if he doesn't come home, I'm very concerned. Or, if he takes longer than necessary or whatever. And I know both of you guys having you on together, the purpose was to really allow other people to hear firsthand what you guys every single day do. You go out, you educate people in the workforce about these types of things that we see that they're now starting to see on TV that happens all the time. And so I just wanted to open the floor, and just have you guys kind of chit chat about what's on your heart, you know, and just kind of what are your thoughts are, and kind of open it up from there before I go into the depth of the conversation.
Yeah, and this is the heart of it for me. And I was able to catch good show with the Wimes. I appreciate their transparency and just their own flavor and their energy. But I felt every tear, and have tears of my own that Michelle was sharing for her husband and for the men in her life. Because I have those same tears. I mean, my husband is a Black man too. My son, 13 years old, and even my daughter. I mean, for all of us. And so I one of the things that I tell Rodney is I always like for him to put his wallet on the console, because what I hope that does is mitigates any confusion about where he might be reaching. And those are the realities that we deal with. I was just joking about our son Kai getting a dirt bike, but in order for him to get over to the trail and the dirt mound, guess what he's got to do? He's got to ride that road. And Rodney has already committed himself that every time he does, I'm going to be right behind him in the car. So it's all of the extra energy and the extra thinking. I mean, if we think about all of the energy that racism takes from people in trying to navigate, especially Black and brown people trying to navigate it. You know, one of the questions that we ask is, you know, why is it important to eradicate racism? And I think about all the stuff that we've been able to accomplish with racism. Can you imagine all the things that we would have been able to do it without it? So it's just, you know, I when I get in these modes and begin to think about that, I begin to mourn all the things that we've lost as not only a community, but as a nation, as a world, because of what racism, how it strips away humanity. And so I think that's kind of how I'm feeling now. I'm a little bit more high energy today, but I was drained yesterday.
Yeah. That's really good. Thank you so much for those of you who are tuning in. Share the broadcast, invite a friend virtually. We're here with some very special people in my life, Dr. Nicole and Stephenie. I really appreciate you all being on. Doc, you have the floor.
Yeah, you know, my son's now 21, but one of my first experiences with him was when he was in preschool, believe it or not. He was 2 and he bit another child. And when I went to pick him up, the owner of the preschool, her mother said, if you don't get a handle on this, he's going to be in jail. 25 months, 2 years old. And so when things happen these days, I'm never surprised, just disappointed. But in my disappointment, I, like everyone else, you know, feel the stress in my body. But I've had to create sustainability tactics because this is the work I do every day. And some of those sustainability tactics are to just say, all right, what things are real versus what things are imagined. Make sure that I get good rest, make sure I'm moving. My gratitude list, which I posted for everyone yesterday to be able to focus on. And because if I'm going to be here and be well and be able to help, I have to have some strategies to pull myself back quickly. And in fact, one of the ways that I end my filter-free Fridays is just simply saying we have work to do. And that term I adopted a couple years ago because it's happening every day. We just happen to see Mr. Floyd. We just happen to see what happened to Mr. Cooper. We just happen to see what happened to Mr. Arbery. This is happening every day in cities all over this country. And we're not hearing about it. And so in that ignorance, you know, we feel like that these are sometimes isolated events. But when you know the gravity of how much they happen, you have to create some strategies for how you can keep getting up every day and continuing to do this work. When Stephenie, I don't know about you, but people share with me every time something goes down in this nation, somebody's going to send it to me. I'm going to get it in the messenger. I'm going to get it in the text. I'm getting an email. Someone's going to call me. And it can be overwhelming if you don't have some self-care strategies. And so I try to employ those. And Stephenie told me, she said, girl, take care of yourself. And so I went to bed early last night, especially when I saw people expressing their anger, because I knew what the narrative was going to be today. I get it. I really do. I think it's irresponsible for any of us who don't know what it's like to live under that kind of pressure all the time to talk about what is an acceptable way of expressing yourself.
For sure.
I think many of us wouldn't know what to do if we had to deal with it for 2 days, let alone every day, day in, day out. It's been happening to us since we were 2. But that
you might storm. I'm sorry, Dr. Price, but for some, they started to storm the Capitol because it felt so out of control, right? And so that you see the differences in how responses. So we do see how certain people and certain groups respond under extreme pressure or duress or that feeling of being out of control.
Right.
But one is and the other isn't.
Right. And what I am grateful for, there are 3 things, I think. One is that Kaepernick's platform, he was kneeling for a reason. He was attempting to do it the way that they said it wasn't palatable. But I think today we would say, dang, I wish I could get a knee and someone just talking about what we could do. So that's one. We see that there was a reason for his platform, and I think it will be elevated as a result of this. 2, I think the disparities between what Stephenie is saying around the people who were at the Capitol building with AR-15s yelling and screaming and thrashing at the glass. Now there's some, I guess you can stand in front of us and say that there's a reasonable way to protest, but that was just 2 weeks ago. So there wasn't a large amount of time between them. And so I think that there's something for us to be excited about there. And then 3rd, I have had a decent outpouring of people who normally are completely silent, trying to figure out how they can help us take a hammer to these systems.
That's good.
So I'm grateful for those things.
That's good. Stephenie, do you have any last moving remarks about being grateful for anything before I move on?
Yeah, I echo so much of that. I'm grateful for just the ability to bounce back. I have some privileges and some luxuries that give me time to just rest. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I don't have have to punch in and punch out. And so I recognize that for those that do, it feels different and it looks different. I'm just grateful for time and space. And choice, because that's a privilege in and of itself. And so, and I'm also grateful that these conversations are becoming more fluid, that we're moving. If you notice, I remember while I was studying at Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, I was part of the Race Relations Institute. Shout out to Dr. Raymond Winbush and everybody that was part of the Race Relations Institute. But we used to call these crucial conversations or courageous conversations. And we hear a little bit of that now, but the more we have them, the more we give example. It's almost like working out. We're these muscles that make more able and more possible. And so we'll talk about that. I hope we'll talk about that a little deeper in the conversation about the power of strengthening the muscle of communication, because when we can acknowledge, we then give ourselves permission to address. And so I'm excited about that. I'm grateful.
Yeah, there was so much denial before. And I'm not saying that there's not denial now, but you absolutely can't change anything that you deny exists. It's not possible.
Well, thank you so much. We could end right there and just call it a night. I know. We got so much to talk about. But I wanted to open with the first question and kind of tie it into Christian Cooper's experience, because a lot of people feel that there are no women, Caucasian women, let's keep it real, that can, be a VP corporate, you know, and have a law firm or be in this executive position, and how dare they, or no way. And like we see that where this incident that a Black man is in a park in Park Patty, as Nicole said on Filter, or it was Teach Me Tuesday. And you know, she talked about, you know, like we can't even go bird watching. Like I have to, you know, really work up the energy and feeling. And I'm not a male by any means, a man of color, but you know, luckily he recorded it. So my question to you guys is like, she's in that executive role. You know, you guys work with people like that all the time, and it's almost like this layer of, yes, you're an executive, but you're not an executive about human dignity, decency. Like, I mean, I don't know. So like, what do we need? Like, what are you guys talking about? Like, I know, Stephenie, you do D&I training, and Nicole, you do D&I training. Are they listening? Like, are they taking notes? Like, because I know you guys talk about this stuff all the time. I mean, there's levels to it, right? Like you guys build up, but what's happening? Like, what's being said?
You know, here's what I see day in and day out. A blind spot is a blind spot because you can't see it. You know, it's so much easier to look at another person and see where they might be wrong, and in your own actions not be able to see it. And when I say that, I'm talking about me too. But to stick to the topic of specifically white women, and there's a ton of research around white women's tears. I'm going to try as much tonight not to talk about my personal opinions, but just to talk about my lived experiences and research. And when I'm just going to make it plain for you. When white people cry, people die. Yeah, literally and figuratively. And so today I was talking to a gentleman. He has not given me the liberty to say, but he successful, started a business, pulled himself up from the debts. By all accounts, a successful businessman. You use all of your biases to figure that out. A white woman cried and said, or a white man actually cried and said he did something, and it ended up costing him $20,000 to get out of it. I have had a former employer not literally cry, but in her tone and in her expression, cry and say, "You stole my work. It cost me $25,000 to defend my own work." My own work. And so while I did win that lawsuit, I'm out of $25,000. And so it kind of rubs me the wrong way sometimes when people talk about disparities on income, because I can't go into court and cry and people believe me because I even had lawyers who had a hard time even taking my case. And so when we think about what that looks like inside of corporations, what does that look like in higher ed? There has to be a certain amount of awareness, as Stephenie stated, that these kinds of things happen, and you cannot you have to look beyond, you have to be intentional. When your initial instinct and your implicit bias says, "Oh, Hillary is in my office crying, let me save her," you have to understand what's at play there so that then you can ask follow-up questions, so that then you are thinking about the defensive stance that you put the person of color or the Black person in, because that's the other thing. My friends who are professors, and Stephenie can speak to this, but if a white student complains about something, now the professor is stuck defending him or herself, and that energy, that time is taken away from basic educating. That's the thing that I'm trying to get white people to see, that racism is hurting you too. You're not getting the best out of your education because your instructor is off trying to defend him or herself against a false accusation. Everyone who's listening, I want to give them one assignment, and that's to go back and listen to the Amy Cooper video without watching. Close your eyes and listen to her when she says, "I'm being attacked by an African-American man." And she's like, you would think she was literally in distress when you're not looking. And I think you should do that exercise, because then you'll understand why people respond to that in certain ways. I talk enough.
No, I like what you're saying, Nicole, because so I'm gonna start where you left off about Amy Cooper. And oftentimes only people of color are charged with playing the race card. That's how we like to say it, the race card.
Mm-hmm.
But Amy Cooper intentionally played the race card. In that moment, she understood well the racial arrangement in America. And she understood her role and her proximity to safety and wellness, right? Through her whiteness. And so she played that. She leveraged her whiteness and her gender, right? To be able to move into the racial arrangement for her benefit. Now, when you go deeper into looking into Amy Cooper, you'll learn a few things. That she also maxed out her contribution limit for Obama, right? So she you would say and would think maybe from that action of being able to contribute to the highest that she was a progressive, right? And some may even say she was a white liberal. And this goes back to what Nicole was speaking about earlier, and to your question, Kiona, about how do we get there? What does the conversation look like? And so often when you hear people, and for Amy Cooper's response, one of the first things she says is, "I'm not a racist." So oftentimes when we think about the dynamic, we think of it in a very dichotomous way, right? We think about racist and then a non-racist, and we're going to really get to what the goal is, which is anti-racist. Right? We want to be anti-racist, but many people just say racist and non-racist. But guess what happens? If you never see yourself, those blind spots that Dr. Price talked about, if you never see yourself as one who can demonstrate and act upon racist ideas, then where is the work for you to do? What have you acknowledged? What are you giving yourself permission to address? And so often when we think about racist and we think about racism, we think about hate mongering. So we say, I don't have a Ku Klux Klan hoodie. I'm not rocking. I'm not a tiki torture. I'm not burning crosses anyone in yard. I'm not a racist. But what that does is that it leaves the window so narrow where we're just now talking about overt white supremacist. What people should really be thinking about is white supremacy. The simple ideal that whiteness is ideal, that is the goal. And so therefore, as I situate myself and I lean, and my proximity to whiteness is really what my actions look like. What does proximity to whiteness look like? What I look like, how I talk, how I walk, what my values are, right? Those things. And so for us in the work that we're doing, and I can't believe I've gone this far without mentioning my partner Rodney. But Rodney and I really seek to do in our work through Sophic and just in life is to really help our own understanding of ourselves, but in those we work with every day for them to better understand themselves and their proximity. And really, which way are they trying to orientate themselves, and what are they reaching for? What are you reaching for? And that's when we really get a chance to talk about white supremacy culture. And then once we talk about white supremacy culture and how you center yourself. So am I centering whiteness in what I do, or am I centering who I am? And so for me, that is Blackness for me, because that's who I am. That's what I steep my values in. But there's also other things that I steep my values in as well. The more that I understand myself and what's important to me, the better I am in being intentional about my movement. Because in truth, we all swim in the waters of white supremacy. And so we have to be intentional to move away from it. But it's not just about moving away from one thing. It is about being very conscious about what are we moving towards. And that's where the work is really at.
Yeah. And I just find so often, when you say white supremacy, people think about neo-Nazis, skinheads, KKK, alt-right, the Tea Party. People are not thinking about the basic definition, which is you think that somehow whiteness is supreme. That's all it means. And so in that, when people even say things like, Black people have to work twice as hard, and they're not saying it as a term of describing what's currently happening, but they're describing their own expectation. That's a form of white supremacy. I should get to be just as lazy as the next white man.
That's right. Be super mediocre and make it to the top.
Average.
So when we talk about, and I love what you're doing, Kiona, because you are promoting Black excellence. And I love that, because the essence of that is a reminder. It's tapping us on our shoulder. It's tapping us right where we can say, you know what, we are excellent. And that's part of changing the narrative. Changing the narrative is extremely important.
Yeah.
We get so many messages. We get inundated with messages that you're lazy. You know who is the number one, what race is the number one consumer of cleaning products? Black people. Now, part of that is because grandma, right? Because we're gonna be clean.
She gonna clean.
Also, I believe part of that is this overcompensating of a narrative that we're nasty, right? This nasty narrative comes from skin color and even some of the dire, states of living that we were really forced upon us, right, through poverty. And so we make those things back and forth. But if we can really understand who we are and give ourselves permission to do it, then we can begin to move away from some of those Black codes. And I understand the working 2 times harder, right? And all those things, those are Black codes. While our white counterparts, to Nicole's point, gets to be extremely mediocre, messed up several times without any of the stress. So how do we get a chance to give ourselves experiences in humanity, mess up and still be okay? That means we have to operationalize equity, that leaders have to make sure that they're tracking through data, they're disciplinary, the same thing that we're doing in schools, tracking the write-ups and what it looks like. Because if you're never tracking it, then how do you know that you're being disproportionate in a workplace of writing up certain people versus others, right? And we're seeing when we're talking about the power of operationalizing equity, it's in the actions that we're taking every day in the workplace. And that also means writing up Amy Cooper, or in her case, firing her butt.
Yeah. Is it enough, Dr. Nicole, to just say, you just lose your job, because we need to get to a point where when you call an emergency act, someone like that, just like if I take mail and if I come to your house right now or Stephenie's house and I take mail out of your mailbox, that's a felony. So do we need something? Do we need some type of action about if I pick up the phone and I make this false phone call and you ain't nothing happening to you, you need to go to jail. You need to do more than lose your job. What is that?
I do. And Stephenie, feel free to push me on this because I know Stephenie does quite a bit more race work than I do. I'm the person who gets people ready for race work. Like they're not even ready for it. There's there have been a couple comments that I've seen come through that we already know what the problem is. Now, what can we do? I would argue, no, actually, people don't know what the problem is. There are so many people who have no idea what the problem is. They don't understand it. And I'm saying Black and white people alike, and it causes us an issue. But when we start talking about what does it look like to have consequences for your actions, Kirk Franklin said, we can't legislate morality. And I struggle with that because sometimes if there's going to be a consequence for your action, your morality will miraculously show up. And this has happened, and this has happened in non-race ways. So, for example, I think it was in 1986. Before then, you could claim dependents on your taxes without sharing their social security number. In 87, they changed the law. Now you have to give a social security number. And guess what? If you lie about that, you're going to get penalized. Guess how many children fell off the rolls? Just 7 million children just miraculously disappeared. And so
I might have been one of them.
But you see what I mean? I think we did. We were able to legislate morality, right? People were then going to do the right thing because there was a law around it. And so I think we need to be super careful with our language. There are consequences for actions. And when you are the vice president of an organization, you're not just an employee, you are a representative. And so if Franklin Templeton did not take harsh actions, it was going to reflect in the marketplace, the workforce, the workplace of Franklin Templeton. And so they had to take direct action. But I saw a partner of mine, a white partner of mine today in HR who said, well, I'm not a fan of retaliation. Ma'am, it's not retaliation. It's a consequence for an action. There's a difference between those things. Retaliation is I did something right, and then because I did something right, I was penalized. It's like the whistleblower laws in place for that. Right. But there has to be consequences for actions. I'm also not a fan of sending everybody to jail for everything. I think we over penalize people and sending them to jail. But you want to know what white people care about? Their dollars. The fine should be so egregious. Mm-hmm. And your community service hours should be, you know what else they don't want to do? Have to serve nobody else. The service hours should be so high, and the victim should be able to choose where you get to do your service.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, and I think in the workplace, and I think this is where we come to, once again, operationalizing equity. Rodney and I, we think it happens in 4 areas or 4 domains within a workplace or just in an organization. And we call that the 4 Ps. The first P is pedagogy. So understanding, where does equity live in the pedagogy? And I don't just mean, I mean everything that means, what the guiding principles, the essence of the organization. So where does equity live in that? Can we see it? Is there evidence of it? The second P is in policy. So that asks the question, how has equity been codified? Or in many cases, we have to ask, how has inequity been codified? What does that look like? Hair policies. That's why we have the Crown Act across the country that is continuing to catch on and get steam, because inequity has been codified. That says that you have to have your hair a certain way. I'm rocking the braid. Shout out to Phoenix. She braided my hair. I love a big bun, but many of you all know that I carry locks and have been doing so my entire, all the way. I've had natural hair all the way from fists through today. So whether it's gone from a teeny weeny afro to a fade,
you clean,
to locks,
you clean, right? Sis, you clean.
I've always had natural hair. And many ask me, how did I progress throughout, even though I've always been a nonprofit sector. Nonprofit really fashions itself out of corporate in many ways. How was I able to do that? What did that mean? I always tell them that performance will shut people's mouths real quick. It's real hard to talk about somebody's locks being, out of compliance of some rule when you are actually hitting your metrics and your targets. But policy is an important thing. The third P is in practice. So how are things implemented? How do we get to that point? Is it done in an equitable way? This is where we should see inclusion, right? And then the fourth P is people. And that's talking about the culture. And the culture really talks about what your organization upholds. So if you have Amy Coopers, and we know, and I'm talking to my nonprofit friends, we know that there are so many Amy Coopers that are in the nonprofit sector.
Here in Kansas City.
Yeah.
Let's make it real close to home.
Everywhere. But we can talk right about this in Kansas City. And if that behavior is tolerated, then no matter what your policies and your practices are, the culture is always the receipts. People say, where's the receipts? It's in the behavior, it's in the culture of what we're seeing. Right. So the actions that we have is always evidence of the thoughts that we think, the beliefs that we have. And that's why changing the narrative is so important, because those thoughts, feelings, and behaviors go in that cycle. They're all consequences of each other. And so really being able to have those consequences, as Dr. Price talked about, helps to shape and guide those policies, shape and guide culture. But your culture will tell you what is really acceptable and unacceptable. And we have Amy Coopers all over the place in the nonprofit world, wreaking havoc, having a savior complex, using deficit-based language, all these things that are evidence of the belief that white is ideal and black and brown is less. And we got to kill it.
Like today. Doc, do you have any I think Stephenie dropped the mic. She just walked away.
She knows that I just absolutely adore her, and many of our philosophies completely overlap. And I think that's why you asked for us to be here together today. And I, when I'm working with organizations, one of the things that where I start is having them look at their mission. almost all of their missions talk about all this, all that. I mean, you want to talk about white language. People like to say all. You say anything, they like to say all. Well, I push them to say, okay, there's nothing on the other side of all. All means all. And so if you have disparities based on race, gender, if we have disparities, if we're in schools and we have disparities based on socioeconomic status, because people love to talk about parental involvement, this, parental involvement, that. When you're responsible for educating all children, you need to be able to educate the ones whose parents aren't involved either, or change your mission, baby. That's so right. and when you start looking at really rich children, their parents ain't involved, and guess what? They're getting educated. And so miss me with some of these narratives. And so I just keep putting in front of people. I call myself a mindset shifter. Let me just keep putting things in front of you. And I want you to try to logic me out of this, because racism, it does not make any logical sense. The system of white superiority makes no logical sense. And so if you can just keep putting things in front of people, and then they can't defend it. They can't defend it. But the emotions will get in the way. White tears will cause your work to get shut down before you can do all of the work. And so I also invite organizations to commit to doing all of the work.
Yeah.
We're going to start with diversity. If we progress to cultural responsiveness, we're going to end on racial equity. And racial equity requires that we look at policies, practices, procedures, people.
The whole 9 yards. Yeah. And we have an example of white tears here in Kansas City. I mean, so that should speak more to home than anything. You know, I read too, you know, and I do my research, and, you know, I know I got a long ways to go in a lot of areas, but, you know, it's evident and it's here. And so that's something that we say, like, oh, we didn't know that can happen. Well, it did, because somebody actually lost their job because they expressed in regards of how they felt. But Stephenie, you talked about metrics, and Dr. Nicole, you mentioned about changing the mission. I'm trying to get them to change the mindset. So there's a lot happening. Everyone feels like they're all over the map. Some people might be managing some people might, you know, be going into the workplace, or, you know, things are kind of looking different. So just what are basic things that, okay, I need to, like, as I'm shifting my mindset, as I'm trying to open up, you know, figure out what's more equitable, what's not, what would you guys encourage, where to start? Where, like, people, policies, all those things, but what do I just need to do when I go back to the office? Or like Michelle said, it needs to start now, like right now. But, you know, at some point you got to see a lot of other people. So what should we be kind of focusing on?
I think a journey always starts with self. I think that we have to examine our own fallacies, the things that we struggle with. I think reading is always the key to that. And, you know, I get it. People are like, no, I need an action. What can I do?
Yeah.
ING, reading, understanding, reflecting. Those are action steps. And the reason why, and I get it, we are drawn, and you can do that too. We can march, right? That's important. What marching does, demonstrations, helps bring attention, to bring awareness and understanding, and to really further articulate the importance of an issue. But the things that maybe look like it takes longer are long-term builders in understanding ourselves that really get to sustainable behavioral change. If we want to continue to see change that happens within us, within our organizations, within our homes and beyond, then we have to think about what produces sustainable behavioral change. So many of you all know my background is as a therapist. So behavioral change is important to me, and it is process oriented. Which means there are things that we need to be acquainted with. There's things that we need to do to help build that full awareness and full transformation into the next steps. And so being able to really understand where are my blind spots, where are the places that I struggle in, and then being able to move that into how you show up every day in your work. So white parents always ask me, Stephenie, what can I do? Talk to your children about race. Help white children understand that they too are raced. That means first, white person, you have to realize that you are raced. Because if we just think about Black and brown people being raced and I'm unraced, then we get into marked and unmarkedness, right? So that means, once again, centralizing whiteness. If I'm centering whiteness, that means I'm normal. Because if you ask a white person, what do they like about being white? 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, I never even thought about it. If you ask a person of color what they like about their culture or ethnicity, they're probably going to say a lot of things because they think about it all the time. So what does it mean when you're thinking about something all the time? How does that then dictate how you talk to people, how you move, how you act? So if white people are going throughout their day and never thinking about themselves as raced, then how do they navigate through a world that has racial implications in everything? So those are the
I can tell you how. I can tell you how. They'll say over and over and over again, I don't see race. That's their way of being able to navigate it. And that dominant narrative is so ridiculous because at 2 years old, you saw that my son was Black and thought that him biting children was going to not lead him to USC where he is, but to prison. So that, I struggle sometimes when people are like, what do we do? And they want, because what that translates to me is we want a quick solution for a problem that has been built for centuries. Come on. So I like to use this analogy that if I got to stand outside and tear this house down and it took them 6 months to build it and all I have is a hammer, I need to get in my mind that it's going to take me at least 6 months to tear it down. This idea that somehow I'm going to have a bulldozer that's just going to knock this whole thing over is not rooted and grounded in the reality of what we're really dealing with and the gravity of what we're dealing with. And so I invite people when they're like, okay, there's a lot of different things. We need to be together on this. I don't know. And the reason why I say I don't know about that is because if you value diversity, then you value unity, not necessarily uniformity. If I am in recruiting, then maybe in recruiting, I make the extra effort to make sure people with different names get a second look. That's a form of dismantling white supremacy. That's right. one form. Yep. And if you worked in recruiting for 10 years and that was all you did, you'd be helping.
Tag me back in. I got something.
Come on back in. You back in.
So something Dr. Price said that is on point, and we talk about this a lot when you think about difference, because oftentimes what we are oftentimes responding to is difference. And especially if we think about it from a white lens, we have several white, we call our clients partners, several white partners that we are supporting through this work. And the question is, how do you respond to difference? And so there are certain inventories and assessments that we can use to help people better understand how they see difference. But in one of the tools that we use, there is this spectrum. And on one end, it asks a behavioral question, and then it asks more of a kind of a theory-based question. And the difference, that variance, is where they're plotted on the graph. So you can be plotted to denial. So this is the continuum. Denial, so you deny differences, right? And we may know some people like that. It's not as many, but they say there's no difference in anybody. The second one is polarization. You can fall on the plot of polarization. And we know what polarization does. It's to ice cap. So it's to the extreme of things. And we can pretty much recognize that. The majority of people who take this inventory across the world fall in what we call minimization. And so I talked about minimization, and that is, well, I don't see color, or there's just one race, the human race. And what does minimization position us to do? Force assimilation. So if I minimize the differences between us, that means that I am not going to change what the status quo is. I'm not changing whatever the dominant, culture is, right? We're not going to touch that. That means you have to assimilate to what it is that I am. And in many cases, we have so many leaders that minimize difference for various reasons that they are forcing assimilation within their workplace and organization. That means that no matter how much you talk about inclusion, you don't create a space for inclusion because you only allow and promote assimilation. Where we want to be is on the other end, on the right side, Where acceptance is, you can fall into acceptance, which says, I understand and I accept that there are differences. And I'm really trying to work. I'm not there yet, but I'm working to figure out what are the places that I need to make moves in to draw the circle wider. And the ideal space, the place that we all aspire to be, is to fall in adaptation. What happens when we agree to adapt our spaces? It's just like the ADA, right? The Americans Disability Act. What did it say? It didn't say if you felt like putting a ramp, or if you felt like putting an elevator, if you had a 2-story building. It said that you have to have access to it. And that goes to what we were talking about what should be legislated and then what should just be a moral code. And we couldn't wait for the disability community or the diverse ability community couldn't wait any longer for people to just lean on doing the right thing. A law made it so you can't build a building, and I know because I've been a part of building one. You can't build a building without permits and codes that say that you've adequately thought about adapting the space so that all people can get in. So I use that example of the ADA because it gives us good example.
That's good.
Receipts that we can actually make a change. And whether or not you like it or not, it can be a direction that we go. And we saw it also again with seatbelts. So we know that change can happen.
And you can't leave people to their own vices. Like, I know you think people are inherently good, but before we had the provisions from the ADA, there were children, if they had disabilities, they weren't allowed to come to school. And you know why they weren't allowed to come to school? Because they were considered to be dangers to themselves. So instead of me making accommodations for you, I'll just say, you know what, I can't have you here because this is dangerous for you. And so it's very interesting. I have people who regularly say it, and I see it showing up right now. I'm tired of telling everyone what to do. Do your own work. And I'm a present day realist and an eternal optimist. Optimistically, that's where we want to be. But in spaces where you have blind spots, you're not going to look them up.
Exactly.
You're not. If there's something how do you know that you are stupid? You do not know when you are stupid. So you need somebody to. And so we need people who are willing to raise the level of consciousness. I happen to be one of those people. I admire the work that Stephenie is doing to raise the consciousness of people so we get more people who are understanding this and trying to do this work. But I want to make a special plea to spiritual leaders, because I find spiritual leaders oftentimes practice what I call spiritual malpractice. They are the worst at saying we're all God's children. And I get it. God thinks that way. God's children don't. And so until God's children see it, how can you help us take a hammer to this system, brother? Can you help us take a hammer to this system? And I maintain that's going to look different depending on where you are.
Yeah. And praying is good, but and Jesus forgives everybody, but we got work to do.
we have got work to do. And Stephenie, when you say do the ings, the reading, the ings, yes, I found that people do not read. One, if you want to know about race in America and you really want to be intelligent, there's one book you can read that can walk you through the whole thing, stamped from the beginning. It's a huge book. It took me a lot to get through it. It's huge. But if you want answers,
it's there.
All of the background about race in America is there. All of the evidence-based research. He's a really decent writer. It's all there. And so one of the things that I'm starting to believe, and I believe this in my heart, people will say they want to move the needle on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mm-hmm. That's what they say. Yeah. They have absolutely no desire to move the needle on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so what I'm grateful for in having my own business is that when I see that what you're interested in is just saying that you want to move the needle and you just want to do one little training session here, I have the ability to say, no, thank you. Let me pass you on to someone else and pass you on to someone else, because I do this because it's my heart work. I want people to be talking about the work that Dr. Nicole Price did 200 years from now to help us put a dent in this system. Yeah. And if you really just want me to come and you want people to sing Kumbaya at the end and you think that's going to make them feel better, that's not it. Now, I have learned that it is helpful if we allow people to do the shameful part of the work in private. That is understanding what your implicit biases are, identifying that, yes, I'm pretty culturally destructive, and if I can find that out in the privacy of my own home, then I can get my little tears out and we can come together to talk about what our way forward is. But I was just recently, I read this book all the time. I can't tell you how many times I've been through it. Where do we go from here? Chaos, Our Community by Martin Luther King. He wrote this book right before he died. He told us what to do in 1968.
That's right. And what I like about that book, and real quick, shout out to my mom.
Hey, Mama.
Mama is just, she said, wait a minute now, don't discount God. Mama, we ain't discounting God. We love, I love the Lord. Look, but the point is that faith without works is dead. And so there's two things that I want to do. One, I want to shout out this book. This is one of the books. Where is it at? One of the books that I'm reading right now. A really great piece. Aluyo does a really great job of giving some practical, people also, what can I do practically? Giving some really practical, tangible to-dos, which is really good. So that is, so you want to talk about race. And so that is another good one in addition to what Dr. Price shared. But one of the challenges when you talked about spiritual leaders and the work. And when we get into it and we talk about this with some of our spiritual partners, and they say, well, it doesn't matter what color Jesus is. And when we say, well, then stop. Then it doesn't matter, then make it historically true, right? If it doesn't matter what color Jesus is. And so understanding the significance of what symbols have been, how they've been leveraged to control the minds of people. And once again, this goes back to changing the narrative. How do we get proximate? How do we get proximate to those that we are seeking to learn more about? And in this case, how do we get proximate to understanding the historical truth about Jesus of Nazareth, right? How do we get to there? And then how do we make sure that it is real in the spaces? I ask people, the next time you go to see the JFK biopic in the theater, how okay would you be if Denzel Washington was playing John F. Kennedy? And then why does it matter? And the answer is it does matter. It matters who's playing it because it gets you in the mind and you're so busy questioning. So when we have images, when we have images of the Messiah that can only be a white image person, right? A white skin looking person. And it is the Messiah, the one that you pray to. And that image can't be shared or at least be accurately portrayed, then we have to understand the effects that it has on the people. One of the things that we ask through our time is to say, tell me the first time that, what age were you the first time that you had a Secretary of State who looked like you, right? And people are like, and many of our white friends are and clients, they're like, I don't know. It's been the whole time. Exactly. For us, who was it? Was it Ron Brown? Right? Wasn't he in that role, right? Or we say, when's the first time that you saw an image of Black Jesus? Right? For some people, they've never seen an image of Black Jesus. And
I had someone who hadn't seen a Black Santa Claus till I posted it last winter.
Yeah. We asked that, when's the first time you've seen a Black Santa Claus? And we remind people at that point, a few years ago in Minnesota at the Mall of America, that they hired their first Black Santa, and people protested. People protested and refused, and you know what they said?
And that's a fictional character.
Yeah, Santa Claus ain't Black. Our response was Santa Claus ain't real.
Santa Claus is not real. Yeah, and I will tell you, I have I regularly get in trouble with the saints because I am going to have you question your thoughts. I'm a mindset shifter, and religion is not out of the question here. I am absolutely a Christian. I don't even remember when I became one because I was born into the faith. When I decided that I was going to be baptized, it was just a matter of my hair. It had absolutely nothing to do with what my belief system. And so I always like to make that clear to people. But I'm not questioning Jesus. I'm questioning Jesus's prophets. When you are talking about race doesn't matter, because for every, and that's not hyperbole. Okay, I'm gonna say it one more time. For every institution in this country, there's disproportionality based on race, even in church. And so I'm a present day realist, eternal optimist. I believe we can get there. But that's optimism that makes me believe we can get there. And that believing we can get there is because I'm going to push on you. When my pastor stands up with his black body in front of a mixed congregation, and after one of these horrible attacks, and he says, we just need to just realize that we all God's children and the race don't matter. Listen, the whole system is based on race mattering. Right. And so you are a leader. You have the power to be able to teach the white people under your tutelage something different. I think you have the responsibility to use that power effectively. And so when we talk about what can you do in your small ways, attack this idea that white is better. And so what does that look like? You want to know how? Let me walk into a church and I see that there's a white Jesus on the stained glass windows. I will close my eyes. You just think I'm praying the whole time, because I have to get that imagery out of my head. It's incorrect. It's incorrect, and it was created. It's inaccurate, and it was created to support this system of there are some people who are inferior. Like, why else would you change the color?
That's right. And it ain't even some people. It's not that it's some people. It is that black is at the bottom and white is at the top. The whiteness is ideal. And those are the things that we have to call out. You know, we once again, acknowledge to address. Acknowledge to address.
Acknowledge to address. And you said the other side that we're shooting for, Stephenie, what is that? Where ideally
we want
adaptation.
That's right. We want to go from minimizing difference and how we see difference to accepting it to adapting to it. And that's when we get to cultural humility, which is how Rodney and I refer to it oftentimes. Our cultural reciprocity, right? How do we have reciprocity within our spaces that we are making room, not creating hierarchical dynamics that say my culture is best, conform, but hey, let's talk about and explore cultures, and then let's begin to adapt our spaces to welcome and to highlight.
Yeah,
this is good.
Yeah, and then it's just like, okay, if we can take that step, but there are people who think that that's simple. That's a huge lift.
That's huge.
It's a huge lift, and it's worth it. In the spirit of getting people to understand more about their own cultures, you know, for the white listeners here, I want to just make this a little more plain for you. If you understood the truth about white history, you wouldn't be surprised about what happened to Mr. Floyd. You wouldn't be surprised about what happened to Mr. Cooper. You wouldn't be surprised about what happened to Mr. Arbery if you understood the truth about white history.
That's right.
And so study your history. Don't just look at the cleansed part of it. If you look at what was occurring for Black people during Reconstruction and then how white people responded, if you understand that will be helpful to you. But if you don't like history and you want me to help answer what to do now, I struggle, because without the history, how do you understand race? Stephenie, do you have an answer for that? I don't.
No, because you can't. And that's why Rodney and I, we incorporate history in everything that we do. We're not D&I trainers. I mean, sure, that's how people respond to us. But what we really talk about and what we really engage in is that historical analysis through a racial lens, and then helping people understand how various operational strategies and efforts really help actualize it. We're community mobilizers, right? We're about engaging community and helping to facilitate and foster understanding, but you can't do it. I mean, Nicole is spot on. You can't do it without understanding history. If you don't understand history, then you won't understand why the police system is so problematic. And I'm not talking about individual police. I'm talking about the impetus of how policing even came about out of the barrels of enslavement. And what came out of that, out of pulling people, sharecroppers, white sharecroppers, out of the depths of poverty and giving them power as a form to bring up and to continue white solidarity. And so there's a historical analysis that has to happen in understanding the history of policing and why it has historically and continues to be problematic for people of culture. And if you don't understand that, then you'll just continue to go back to the individuals who serve as police officers, right? Well, that's a good person.
And that's a good person. They didn't mean to.
They didn't mean to, but we're talking about the system. So we got to go to systemic change, systemic shifts. It's hard to do that if we don't understand historical and have a historical analysis through a racial lens, remembering that racism permeates every system. And every system. And if we're not asking ourselves as leaders, what are the racial implications of my decision? Then we're not doing the work. And that's another thing that in talking to all of us here, as a leader in your role, you should be asking yourselves, what are the racial implications of this decision? What are the assumptions that I am using to come to this conclusion? And who around the table is helping me think about this? That is how you can really demonstrate and have evidence. Once again, where's the receipt of who's around the table that's helping you think through these things? But we should always be asking the racial implication.
And when you when you ask the racial implications, the barrier that I have to get over, because just as Stephenie and Rodney are not diversity and inclusion experts, I don't really think I am either. I have my doctorate in leadership and management. I'm trying to help people be decent leaders. But you can't be a good leader if you don't understand how to create equitable opportunities for everyone on your team. You can't. And the biggest challenge that I have is helping leaders to see that, no, there's no such thing as this race neutral, culturally agnostic work environment where these things just don't matter. What I need you to understand is that when you decide you're going to be race neutral, you are putting everyone with Black skin at a disadvantage.
That's right.
Yeah. Every single person.
You're making them conform. It's assimilation. You're forcing assimilation on all those who don't look like you.
Well, we might have to do a part 2. I think something about this double play, y'all have knocked the ball literally out of the park. This has been great, and time flies when you're having fun. Once again, time flew earlier. But I thank you so much for doing this. And I mean, I'm still learning. I beam to you guys, and I know that there's much more strides that I need to do. I need to read more. I need to learn more. And I'm a woman of color that's looking to you guys and listening to these things and learning my own history. But I do know that there's a lot of work for everyone. I do know that I do see the inequities that exist. And I think, Stephenie, we didn't even talk about the RE training, and I didn't even mention Doc about, in Kansas City, we have so many people. I mean, I know you guys don't consider yourselves trainers, but you qualified in my eyes. So if somebody got a problem, like you said, don't even send them my way. And Doc said, don't even tell them to come to me. They better be ready for everything.
I do. When all of my business is word of mouth. Yeah. And when people share that word of mouth, I say, listen, you make sure when you send somebody my way, they're serious. If they're just interested in checking the box, it's so tiring. I think that's the part people don't understand. There's a whole lot of ways to make money. I don't have to make money in ways that are going to send me to the grave sooner. And so these people,
that's why I own my own company.
You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, we want to.
I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes. Like, can I not push the clock? I got a little bit more time, but still. Yeah, but now, like anything is possible. Go ahead, Doc.
Well, people write laws, and it's just like people create suspension rules and handbooks. People create dress codes that have to do with hair. It's people. And so are you solidifying the system based on the rules, the policies, the practices you're coming up with, or are you dismantling it? And that means you have to look at the rules and say, is this disenfranchising a certain group of our population? And if so, how can we rectify that? Yeah, that's an intentional question. An intentional question.
Yeah, I just think it's really time for people who are not serious about the work to really step aside and stop getting in the way of, people like you guys who really want to see people like me that are emerging and up and coming really, see change, and we don't have to deal with, a lot of the things that if people just really, like you said, Stephenie, it starts with you. The journey starts with you, and did a self analysis, we would be in a much better situation. So hopefully tonight for this conversation, people really took in what you guys had to say. Hopefully somebody learned something new.
What's it? Yeah. First of all, I'm sorry. You've been trying to close this out for about 2 minutes now.
No, I'm not. I'm trying to be mindful of y'all's time. I'm being mindful of y'all's time.
So real thank, and I appreciate that. I want to put an ED on your ing. It is still something to you, but you have emerged. You thank you for the continuous platform, and that doesn't mean that there's still not more to do, and there's still not more. But I just want to just acknowledge your growth and just the work that you're doing. So congratulations on that. And then I also want to shout out and just pay homage to the amazing breadth and depth of trainers and D&I trainers and community organizers that we do have in this city, in this region. Rodney and I are privileged to work with many of them who are part of the Kansas City Race, Equity, and Inclusion Project, our community advisory board. There are so many, and I don't want to mess up by throwing out names and not getting everyone, but there are a host of people that have dedicated their lives to this work. And so whether you call yourself a D&I trainer, a community organizer, anti-racist activist, thank you for the work that you're doing. And in truth, we don't have to wait on others to come and do it. We invite them, we learn from them, we ask them to continue to shepherd us through it. But we also have to figure out what is our individual role and what does that look like? And that doesn't mean everybody needs to go out and profess and that they are trainers and do this training, but figure out what it is that you can do. Mm-hmm. What questions can you ask yourself? What type of mind shifting and challenging to Nicole's point do you need to be a part of so that you can make sure that you are part of the process? Because if you are not, that means you are anti the process. Yeah. And that's something that is very important. If you are not moving with and moving it forward, then you are standing against it. No matter how liberal you feel like you are, no matter how many Black friends you feel like you have,
know how many Black husbands and babies and grandchildren,
no matter how much Black hair you didn't comb, it is still against the progress and the movement of it. So we all have to figure out what is our role, what are the action steps, and then continue to support those that are doing the work. There are a host of organizations that have dedicated themselves to this. We need to all be donating to those organizations and seeking them out and donating and supporting, just like we need to be intentional by supporting Black and Brown owned businesses. We have to make sure leaders look at your supply diversity list or your vendor list and not just put WMBE by the names or Black owned. I want you to also list all the white vendors that you have, because oftentimes while we're just looking for the WMBE, that means that we're not seeing that 87% of our contractors are white.
And that's another way to just make white center whiteness, because they don't label the white vendors, and all of the white vendors should be labeled as white. And people get upset just by you calling them white. They think that's racism. So I think there's just so much work to do. And I think if anybody has the time that the Race and Equity Institute is worth going through that session. I went through that session. It was one of the singular best things I did. I think everyone should check out what Stephenie at Sophic Solutions and Rodney are doing over there. And I will also say, some of y'all out here doing diversity work and you don't know what you're talking about, and it's sit down. Now, because listen, I'm a chemical engineer by degree. You can't go doing any kind of engineering projects without being certified. And so some of these folks out here, you talking about what qualifies you? What book have you read? That has been one of the most shocking things for me as I've gotten into this space, that some people are uniquely unqualified and they are doing this work. Need to sit down somewhere.
Dead over there being we ain't gotta let
this conversation was supposed to end an hour ago.
I'm present day realist, eternal optimist. What you might be able to do for the work is sit down somewhere or do something else. You're not qualified.
Figure out your role, do the work, connect, and engage, and obviously challenge yourself. So we gotta challenge ourselves. But I appreciate those that are out there doing the good work. Shut up, Kiona. I appreciate those who are doing good work.
We got work to do. I mean, we gotta laugh. I mean, it's been a horrible week. Like, I just had to get it all out.
Well, Stephenie, she can pour cold water warm, so she gonna try to make it sound good. She knows some of these people out here uniquely not qualified, and they need to find something else to do, and that would be the best thing for the work.
Thank you all so much.
If you gonna look at my hair and tell me I need to straighten it, if I want to have a contract with you, you probably shouldn't be doing diversity work. That's all I'm gonna say. Like you probably shouldn't be doing diversity work.
They told you to put some heat on the honey blondes.
Yes. On. And if my mom and my grandma couldn't get me to straighten it,
it ain't happening. It's not happening. Look, everybody that's tuning in, people want Up Next to eventually later this year have an in-person event. So everybody who's came on the show, I'm not for sure it's not even going to be anytime soon, but when social distancing kind of eases up, right? But, this thing has been so cool to really connect with a lot of people around Kansas City. I thank you guys so much for coming on and giving me your time and letting me kind of, act crazy and crack up and cry and just share the world with you guys. And thank you all for tuning in tonight. And
thanks for letting me be on here with Stephenie.
Thanks for letting me be on with a good doc. Shout out.
So people are saying we need a part 2. So I will have to get with you guys later and figure out when that's going to happen. But next week we have a great lineup as well. So next week, Monday through Thursday. I know, Stephenie, I've talked to your husband. And that potentially for sure Dr. Carpenter and him are going to come on, Edgar and Laura, just an amazing lineup next week as well. So I'm really excited about that. We're out, and you heard it here on Up Next. Peace out.
Shout out. Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah, y'all gotta